I chose my stepfather to walk me down the aisle, and now my dad is begging for a second chance. After seeing the photos, I was escorted down the aisle by my stepfather. After seeing the pictures, my dad broke down in tears and is now pleading for a second ceremony. I got married yesterday. When my dad eventually arrived in the evening after everything was finished, we spoke in a way that brought tears to his eyes. I feel terrible now because of that. To put things in perspective, I became engaged to my fiancé approximately 5 months ago. We chose to get married in our garden with just our loved ones because neither of us wanted a large wedding with lots of guests in a vast location. Our goal was to have a modest, intimate, and private wedding. Since we were getting married on the day of our 4th anniversary, this was a really memorable day for us, who had been together for 4 years. We still had decorators and caterers coming in, so it was obviously not possible to reschedule. Despite the little, I was unable to grant my dad's plea to postpone it because of this. I didn't want to because I didn't think it was necessary, more than the fact that I couldn't. My dad wasn't asking me to postpone my wedding because of an urgent matter. My golden child brother was in town and had planned a camping trip for the same weekend, so he wanted me to put it off. I'm not making it up. I promise. This is so ridiculous that I doubt I could ever create it. I couldn't think of a single medical emergency that would require him to wait a week that couldn't be rescheduled. So when my dad called me last week, he said he wouldn't be able to attend my wedding if I held it that weekend because he had a medical emergency. It was a weak excuse. My brother had surprised him with a camping trip, which he had consented to go on, but it happened to fall on my wedding day. I persisted until he finally told the truth. The camping trip was my dad's top priority, but I think it's very clear what the decision should have been. He clarified that he didn't want to miss out on spending time with my who only visits for a few weeks per year. My dad also tried to persuade me that since my wedding wasn't a big occasion, it would be simple to reschedule. He maintained that all I needed to do was talk to the merchants and let a few people know. I made an effort to explain why the wedding date was significant to me, but I soon saw that it was useless. He was going camping with my brother and had already made up his mind. My dad has always given preference to my brother, so I wasn't surprised by this. 3 years older than I am, my brother, 30 meters, has always been an overachiever. In the meantime, I've been a typical child. Naturally, he received a lot of attention and was constantly complimented, while I frequently felt ignored. He was such a brat with an inflated ego that I was unable to be glad for him, even though I used to feel jealous of him. He became conceited from all the attention and honestly thought he was a gift from God to humanity. We never got along, since he was annoying and behaved like a bully to me. When he left for college, I was relieved. I was in middle school when our parents got divorced. My mom had an affair with one of her college pals, which led to the divorce. My dad agreed to split custody despite the unpleasant divorce that left everyone bitter. The affair was shocking, not the divorce, to be honest. My parents had a constant argument for as long as I can remember. They were never really happy together, even in my fond childhood memories. During family get-togethers or vacations, they simply put on a front for other people. They hardly ever talked, or even looked at one another. At home, they eventually slept in different rooms. They probably stayed together for the purpose of staying together after falling out of love. My mom had her affair because neither of them tried to make things better. My dad had never been a pleasant man to live with, and I'm not attempting to defend her. Their marriage was going through a particularly difficult period when my mom had an affair. They got into violent arguments nearly every day, and my dad's heavy drinking just made matters worse. My mother eventually came clean about the affair and left the family one day. She still made an effort to communicate with us both, though my brother entirely disregarded her messages, and I was the only one who replied. She had cheated on our father, and he could never forgive her. My brother's inability to forgive her wasn't shocking. He and my dad have always shared a unique bond. Even though my dad denied it, it was clear from the time we were young that he had a favorite. It was evident from his conduct. My relationship with my father deteriorated as we grew older. My dad appeared to be upset with me after the divorce when I made the decision to keep up a friendly connection with my mom and stepdad. He became aloof. He probably wanted me to behave like my brother, who was often disparaging our mother and her new husband. A few months after the divorce was finalized, my mom got married again, and I was a bridesmaid at her wedding. My brother declined to go. My brother was forced to spend half the month with my mother because she had partial custody. Regardless of his sentiments, my brother didn't like that my mother didn't play favorites. Therefore those weeks were unbearable. He was unable to escape punishment for his misbehavior at her home. My dad made multiple attempts to request full custody, alleging that my mom and her spouse were abusing my brother. He failed because his claims were unfounded. Looking back, I'm happy I only had one parent who truly cared about me. My mother. I didn't despise my stepfather. He was a good man as well. I had mixed feelings toward my mother. As a child, I wasn't sure if I should forgive her for cheating on my dad. I ultimately made the decision to follow my happiness. I put money into maintaining a positive relationship with my mother because it made me feel at ease. I'm glad I did. 6 years ago she passed away from cancer. What mattered was that she was always a good mother to me, regardless of the events in her marriage. My brother was scarce, even in her last days. Before she passed away, he did pay her a few visits, which gave her some serenity. My stepdad moved out of state when she passed away, but we continued to communicate. The repercussions of my mother's death. My brother acquired a job in London and moved there around a year after my mother's death. Now he comes to see our dad once a year. I don't talk to my brother anymore. However, my connection with my dad started to become better once my brother moved out and my mom passed away. After finding out about my mom's infidelity, he expressed regret for his lack of warmth for me. He acknowledged that he had acted in ways he wasn't proud of, particularly toward me, since he felt deceived and hurt. He tried to improve our relationship and admitted that he had always given my brother more attention. We've become closer over the last few years, which I never imagined was possible. I asked him to lead me down the aisle at my wedding because I thought things had improved. He concurred. As long as he showed me love and respect, I didn't mind that he was still very close. My brother, the ultimate camping trip. But recent events made it clear to me that, as long as my brother was alive, I would never really be a priority. I came to see that my brother's relocation away was the only reason my dad even made an effort to patch things up between us. I become less important when my brother is around. It was a terrible wake-up call when my dad asked me to reschedule my wedding so that I could go camping with my brother. The realization that things hadn't altered as much as I had thought was painful. I made a snap decision. In the heat of the moment, I consented to postpone my wedding. I called my stepdad a few minutes after I hung up with my dad. I invited him to lead me down the aisle without thinking twice. I'll admit that what I did at the time was spiteful and motivated by retaliation, but I believed that I was being good for myself by reprimanding my father. I didn't mind my stepdad filling in because he was already invited as a guest to the wedding and he's always been a good man. Even though we don't communicate often, we are still close because he helped me get through my mother's burial. He was first hesitant to accompany me down the aisle, as he knew my father was also invited. Nevertheless, I persuaded him, and he accepted. I felt justified, so I didn't think about it too much. My fiancé's encouragement provided me with the necessary validation. My annoyance was exacerbated by the fact that my dad had hardly communicated with me during the preceding week, perhaps because my brother was back in town. As anticipated, my dad did not attend my wedding yesterday. I waited until the very last minute, in the hopes that he would surprise me. However, he didn't. For the most part, I was content as my stepdad led me down the aisle. After all, it was my wedding day. Later, when I emailed my dad a picture of my stepdad escorting me down the aisle, that was the only hitch. I assumed he would be upset. I was surprised when he decided to confront me on the following bus back to town. My father and brother showed up that night as the visitors were departing. They appeared worn out. But my dad said the most. He urged me to have another ceremony so he could let me down the aisle, and expressed regret for not taking my wedding seriously. He acknowledged that I was justified in my conduct and that it was rude to ask me to reschedule for a camping trip. All he wanted was another opportunity, and he regretted everything. He even declared that he only wanted the joy of seeing his daughter go down the aisle, and didn't care if no one else showed there. I was offended by his desperation. It became evident that his activities were motivated more by a desire to outdo my stepdad than by a genuine concern for me. I asked him if, had my stepdad not escorted me down the aisle, he would have responded in the same manner. His reluctance was sufficient enough. I informed him that he had let me down and that I would not be getting married again, merely to please him. He blew the opportunity he had. He started crying and pleading for forgiveness when I ordered him to leave. He stated that he regretted everything after seeing the photos and that he had not known I was serious about holding the wedding. He adamantly apologized for not putting me first. He accused me of being callous and overreacting to a single error when I asked him to go once more. The final straw was that I informed him that I had every right to defend myself at this point if he could treat me badly for the rest of my life without good cause. I reminded him that his actions were the reason behind everything that was happening to him. Unlike him, my stepdad truly cared about me, so I told him I was happy he escorted me down the aisle. Then I left him crying and went back inside. My brother and father were gone when I looked out a while later. Considering I regret what I said, now that some time has gone by. Knowing I brought him to tears makes me feel worse. I question whether asking my stepdad to escort me down the aisle and then putting it in my dad's face was too harsh. Revolves have come to the conclusion that I don't need to apologize. After giving it some serious thought, my dad decided to put a camping trip ahead of my wedding. I've been defending his actions my entire life, and I'm sick of it. My dad's actions have no justification, and I am free to choose not to forgive him. I'm sorry for bringing him to tears, but a person can only take so much abuse. Beyond that, I think it's okay to defend your rights, even if doing so causes harm to the other person. I cried a lot during my early and adolescent years due to my dad's treatment of me. I never showed anyone how much it hurt me, not even him. I don't think he would have changed even if he had. I'm happy that I didn't get in touch with him once more. My husband supports me and says it's the appropriate decision. After we chatted about it, he wanted this decision to be mine alone, which is why he didn't voice his opinion sooner. I also expressed my guilt to my stepfather for becoming involved in my problems with my father. I even said I was sorry for using him as a means of retaliation. He assured me though that it didn't concern him. He knows how much I cherish him, and he felt gratified that I considered him first. My guilt was lessened by his comprehension, and I'm happy he doesn't take offense. I think it's obvious now to everyone who was upset with me for bringing up my stepdad. He doesn't mind. I don't mind my choice, as long as he's cool with it. Drama after the wedding. Since the wedding a few days ago, my dad has been phoning and texting me daily. I don't want to hear what he has to say, therefore I haven't even opened or replied to his messages. I've made the decision to put my attention on my upcoming honeymoon with my spouse rather than this issue. First update. My dad called again this morning. I chose to read his messages for the first time even though I didn't answer. They were all apologies. As one might anticipate, he agreed that I had every right to be angry, said he hadn't been a good father, and begged for another opportunity to make things right. He acknowledged his prejudice against my brother and vowed to make every effort to mend our friendship. I felt depressed after reading those messages. The entire scenario is quite distressing, but I've decided that I need space. I contacted him back to establish boundaries after reading the messages. I requested that he refrain from contacting me for a time because I was going on my honeymoon. Repeated apologies just serve to prolong the suffering. They won't alter the past. I made it obvious that I needed him to honor my wishes, but I also vowed to get in touch when I was ready. I understand, he said, adding that he would wait for me to get in touch with him. Second update. As I enter the third day of my honeymoon, my father has not gotten in touch with me, but my brother contacted me out of the blue today, and it was totally unnecessary. I didn't recognize the number, since he was using a burner phone. I was going to hang up when I heard his voice and responded, but he baited me by calling me an escapist. Sadly, it was successful, because he is skilled at making me feel uncomfortable. My brother gave me a lecture on the value of family, saying I should apologize for the way I was treating our dad. Additionally, he bemoaned how uncomfortable my dad was and how I had ruined his visit by cutting short their camping trip. He went on to accuse me of being envious of him, saying that my behavior was motivated by resentment because my father put him before me. He further claimed that, by continuing to see our mother during the divorce, I betrayed my father. His childishness astounded me, but I wasn't shocked. I informed him that a man, child like him, would act in this way. I explained that I actually felt sorry for him and wasn't at all envious of him. My sibling is still emotionally stunted, despite having a successful profession. Whatever he accomplishes, he will always be unhappy and unlikable. I interrupted him when he attempted to argue with me, stating that it would only serve to highlight his desperate attempt to hide his discontent. I ended the phone before he could say anything else, even though I know I shouldn't have talked to him at all. It was rewarding in its own right. I made the decision to only take calls in an emergency from that point on for the remainder of my trip. Update 4. Talking to my dad. A few days ago, I came home from my honeymoon. After a while of staying in holiday mode, my husband and I decided it was time to return to our regular life and our jobs. I made the decision to face my father yesterday. I went to his residence after work. Naturally, my brother was also present and he appeared astonished to see me. Since I don't care about him, I gave him my full attention. I didn't want to have any serious conversations with my brother, so I asked to talk to my dad alone. I was certain that he would be unable to be silent and would continuously interrupt, and I couldn't stand it. My dad and I were finally alone when my brother left the room, albeit he appeared to be upset about it. When we were alone, I expressed my disappointment in my father's actions. I reminded him that I had asked him to lead me down the aisle because I felt our relationship had improved over the previous few years, but it became evident what his priorities were when he requested me to reschedule the wedding. My stepdad is significant to me in his own right, but I acknowledge that asking him to lead me down the aisle was selfish and vengeful of me. I informed my dad that I still didn't know if he had come that day because he truly regretted missing my wedding or because he felt competitive with my stepdad. In any case, it was no longer relevant. We cannot undo the past. What has been done is done. A way forward for reconciliation. He initially appeared to be very distraught, but I assured him that starting over was the only way to move on. I am aware that a lot of people would anticipate that I would completely cut him out of my life, but in all honesty, I don't want to or can live with that. I know how quickly life can take individuals away because I lost my mother to cancer. I can't ignore the positive times I've had with my father, even with all the negative ones, but I also can't deny the pain he's given me. I clarified that I had reached a point of acceptance. I'm willing to give him another chance to make amends for his mistakes from now on. I urged him to allow me that space though, because I need time to recover. We can attempt to mend our father-daughter relationship when I feel ready, which could take weeks, months, or even years. I wish to avoid touch till then. I asked him if he could accept this and he nodded. Before I left, he asked if he may give me a hug. It was emotional when we hugged, but I held back from crying until I was back in my car. In conclusion, we decided on that, and I believe it works, at least for the time being. The course of events will become clear with time. I'm comfortable with the situation for the time being.